On the way back into town, BP stopped by a creek. He pulled a gold pan out from behind his seat, and they dropped into the creek. BP showed him how to pan for gold. They found some traces of colour, and Hunter was hooked. He was going to go prospecting. Back in town, they took the skins to a small tannery who were very pleased with them. They turned the skins into fashion jackets. Because the possums were a pest in this area, the state would normally poison them. Poisoning wasn't a nice death at all. The traps were nice and quick and clean. Hunter's time was done. He thanked BP. BP said, "I've got something to tell you." Hunter sat down to listen. BP reminded him of the farm up in the mountains where they shot the rogue dog. Lots further up in the mountains was where he and the farmer had found the small gold stream they called the vault. They'd cleaned it out. However, the little stream tumbled into a deep chasm that they hadn't been able to access. "You'd have to abseil into it," BP said. Neither of them had ever made it back up there, and they were both too old now anyway to do that sort of thing. BP showed Hunter a news report. There had been a massive dam built up in the mountains. It had been years in the making, and it was about to be filled. BP showed Hunter on a map where the dam was and where the vault was. The vault would be completely flooded as the dam filled. BP said he thought there might be a one-off opportunity to get into that area before it flooded, and maybe, just maybe, find a good haul of gold. Hunter was ready to go. BP helped him to get the right prospector's license, so everything was legal. BP told him it was hard country and very remote. The farmer, he'd be in town next week and could give him a lift, and he had a horse trailer. Hunter had a talk to the young lad on the neighbour's farm who had looked after his rat traps while he was off possuming with BP. The lad was more than happy to carry on doing it, beat having a paper round, and Hunter paid him well. Hunter was going to ride Moxy into the mountains. Moxy could carry a lot of gear and food. The farmer had brought a horse into town. He'd sold it to one of the pony clubs, and Hunter hoped Moxy would get into the horse float, and he did, no worries. Just before they left, Molly Muffin came around to say goodbye. She handed Hunter a plastic container full of her new muesli bar mix. They said see you later to each other, and he was off. He spent the night at the farmer's and learned more about the place he was going to, and at dawn he headed off. They didn't rush, just a steady pace till dusk, when Hunter made camp. It was certainly rugged terrain, and a number of times they went down wrong avenues, dead-end canyons and such not, and they had to backtrack. Tiger country, BP called it, even though there were no tigers here. At the end of the fourth day, Hunter was in the area and found a nice small clearing to set up camp. He had a tarp and he strung it between trees and set up a tent underneath it. He dug a small trench so water couldn't get under the tent and inflated his air mattress. No need to be uncomfortable when you don't have to be. He set up a ring of rocks for a small fireplace and dug a latrine just outside the campsite. Early the next morning he searched for the creek. He found a couple of creeks and panned them, but none of them drained into a chasm. The main river system that would fill the dam was down below his campsite. The weather was beautiful, crisp and clear. Way off in the distance, Hunter could see the dam. It would be filling by now. It took him 2 days to find the vault. Both the farmer and BP had told him it would be hard to find, and they weren't wrong. The trees grew right over it. It was narrow, with only a low water flow. He followed it, and it dropped into a chasm. BP had panned the creek bed where they got all the gold out of, but that was all gone. BP had told him it had gone, that they'd set up sluice boxes and things, and Hunter now panned the creek bed, but he only found a trace of colour. He looked into the chasm. It was quite scary, narrow, deep and dark. Hunter set up a rope tied off to a sturdy tree and descended to the bottom. It must have been about 15 metres deep and 20 metres long, and at the end of the chasm the creek vanished through a fissure in the rock. Hunter panned the creek bed. It was rich in gold. He climbed back up the rope to get some gear. He had a little portable sluice box, a spade and a bucket. He set up the sluice and began putting material through it. Occasionally he picked a nugget off the ground. Back at his campsite, Hunter stored the gold in a screw-top canister. Sometimes at night he opened up the canister and looked at it. He had gold fever. He dug a hole with a rock on top, just in case someone stumbled into his campsite. Occasionally a helicopter would fly up the valley from the dam site. One day the helicopter hovered over the river out from his campsite. Hunter couldn't see into the cabin with the sun behind it. Then the helicopter left and Hunter thought no more of it. Sometimes the helicopter would fly overhead up the valley at night, then do a return trip. He thought it must be something to do with the dam project. He had a large pile of gold and was nearly at the end of the chasm. It would be time to go soon. He was nearly out of food and had been there a month. Cell phones didn't work up on the mountain. His mum had insisted on Hunter having a satellite phone. Once a day he phoned to say he was still alive. Further up the mountain it must be raining, as the peaks were shrouded in rain clouds. The clouds were dark and ominous. It looked like the weather was changing. He was down in the chasm getting the last of the gold when he heard the helicopter. It sounded like it had landed down by the river. Hunter climbed out of the hole and went back to his camp. He couldn't see anything. The helicopter must be down on the river flats. Hunter walked to the edge of the small bluff that he was camped on and received a shock. The river was right up to the bluff and rising. It must really be raining further up the valley. The helicopter was on a bank about 20 metres upstream. Hunter turned around and got a second shock. There was Henry Maguire and Stan Maguire. Henry said, "We've little time, Hunter. Where's the gold?" He was silent for a moment. Henry said, "Shoot the horse, Stan." They were both armed with high-power hunting rifles. Hunter called out, "No, it's under the rock." Pointing at the rock, he rolled the rock and retrieved the canister. It was heavy. There was a lot of gold in it, maybe as much as 10 kilos. Henry took it. After looking inside, Henry wanted Hunter to show him where it came from. As Hunter started to lead them, Henry called out again, "Shoot the horse, Stan." Stan turned and raised his rifle. Moxy, who was standing in the clearing, bolted, and Stan fired. Hunter didn't know if Moxy was hit or not. He led them to the chasm, and the small creek was starting to fill from the flooded river, and the chasm was shrouded in spray. Hunter pointed down into the chasm with the rope descending. Henry and Stan could see it was impossible to get out without the rope. They made Hunter climb down. Stan untied the rope and threw it down. The water was knee-deep, and Hunter knew he was in big trouble. The rain began. Heavy, furious drops. The water flowing into the chasm was a waterfall now. It was starting to overwhelm Hunter. The waters coming into the chasm faster than it could flow away, or the river level was now higher than the outlet for the stream, wherever that was. Hunter began to pray. He couldn't get on his knees. The water was turbulent and up to his chest. His dad, Smith, had been coming over to the stables, sometimes telling him, "Don't forget your prayers." Hunter usually forgot. He remembered now and called out to God. He thought his end would be here. Hunter heard the voice in his head. He thought he must be going mad. Get the bag. What bag? Hunter thought. Then he remembered he'd left his leather shoulder strap bag down the chasm when he'd climbed out to see the helicopter. That would be somewhere sunken under all the water. The rain had increased in intensity. A major weather bomb was hitting the mountains. There were flood warnings out for down the valleys and on the flats. People were wondering if the riverbanks would hold. It was one of those 1 in 150-year storms that seem to come every year these days. Hunter managed to get on a ledge. He was now in water up to his waist. Looking up, there was only a curtain of rain. It was dark in the chasm. He couldn't even see the top of it. Get the bag. Hunter looked, and there was his bag floating, mostly submerged, swirling in an eddy. He grabbed it and put it over his shoulder. What good it would do him, he was not sure. He was praying again. He could feel his strength ebbing and the cold seeping in. There was that voice. Get the brolly. Hunter reached in the bag and brought out the glocky brolly. He'd long forgotten he even had it in the bag. He'd never even opened it yet. He did now. He remembered the place to press, and the brolly opened up. Hunter turned it upside down and managed to drag himself into it, only getting it half full of water, which he furiously bailed out with his hands. Here he was inside a brolly floating in a maelstrom. The chasm rapidly filled. There was only just room for the brolly to fit as it rose upward with the water. Hunter had to fend off the side so it didn't get caught. He caught a glimpse, just a flash of colour. It was on a small ledge. Hunter reached out and picked it up. There were 3 substantial gold nuggets. They had been uncovered by the heavy rain. They had probably been lying there for millennia. He put them in his bag and concentrated on staying alive. The chasm filled to the brim and overflowed. Hunter was able to step out and made his way to his camp. The river, combined with the rain, had flowed right up to it. There was no camp left. Hunter heard a sound, a snorting. He turned around, and there was Moxy. Without hesitation, Hunter swung up onto Moxy and they left. It was hard going and the rain ceaseless. At this rate, the dam would fill in days, not years. Once they climbed up high, he found a rock overhang that, while wet, was sheltered from the rain. He had matches, but everything was sodden. Moxy seemed a bit happier out of the rain. Hunter examined him, but couldn't find any wounds Stan had missed. Hunter was hungry, and he remembered the small container Molly had given him. It was in the bag as well. He opened it. It was waterproof, the box. Well, those muesli bars were incredible. They filled you up and had explosions of fruit flavour and weren't dry like most muesli bars. Moxy crunched a couple down as well, and there was still half a box left. It took them 4 wet and sodden days to get out off the mountain. Even then it was still raining. Hunter was absolutely exhausted. He was pretty sure Moxy was as well. He was on the road down to the farmer's house when he saw a ute. It was BP's. Hunter was glad to see him. BP gave him a jacket, and he rode on to the farmer's. Before Hunter fell asleep, he made sure Moxy was in the barn with some hay. BP phoned the Gunters and said Hunter and Moxy were okay, exhausted but okay. When Hunter woke up, they'd know what had happened. When Hunter had failed to make the satellite phone calls, his mum became worried. The whole state was in a state of emergency from the storm, and there weren't resources to search for Hunter. BP had said he'd go and have a look. He did and found them, walking down the road. Hunter slept solidly for 16 hours, and when he woke up, he told them the tale and showed them the gold nuggets. They weighed them. 2 kilos. They were monstrous. Moxy stayed on the farm, and Hunter went back to town with BP. The first stop was the police station. Eric was very busy with the state emergency, but made time to hear Hunter. He was most interested to hear about Henry. He'd heard rumours himself, but wondered what Henry would be doing in a helicopter up in the mountains. He told them he'd be going to have a chat at the Maguires. When he got home, everyone was pleased to see him and wanted to know all about his adventure. Molly threw her arms around him and hugged him tight. He told them and showed them the gold. He told Smith in particular how he had to pray. Smith just smiled and nodded his head. Eric made some inquiries and found out that Maguire Holdings' banking interests were the bondholders over the dam project. The construction firm that built the dam was closely connected to the Maguires. They had quite a large shareholding in it as well. Not that that was public knowledge. Eric decided to go up to the Maguire mansion and have a look around and a chat. He took his detective. The detective hadn't been able to find Henry, but had found out a lot about his shady dealings. Stan invited them in when they knocked on the door. He heard Eric ask about Hunter's accusations and laughed. Sounds kind of fanciful to me. Why would I want to do that? Eric thought there were many reasons, but didn't voice them. Stan confirmed that he had been at the dam. It was one of Maguire Holdings' bigger projects. Running the power station would be many years of work and income now. Stan promised to let Eric know if he saw his father Henry. Eric and the detective left. The detective said, "He's a liar." And Eric said, "Proving it, that's the problem." Stan was thinking he quite liked being in charge. The power was intoxicating. Henry slipped in and out of the country, still very much running things behind the scenes. They had both been up at the dam when Henry spotted smoke, just a thin trail off in the distance, Hunter cooking dinner. Henry was disguised and followed Stan around. He'd insisted they go to have a look. As the helicopter had hovered, they'd seen Hunter. Henry was aware of the rumours of the gold in the area. Every time the helicopter went up the valley, Henry had the helicopter take thermal image video of Hunter and his camp. He knew Hunter was getting something. On the day he demanded the gold, it was an educated guess. He would have been happy to just get rid of Hunter and the horse. The 10 kilos of gold was an unexpected bonus. It was still in the canister. Henry was in the house and heard Stan talking to Eric. "That Eric has to go," he told Stan. "If you couldn't have the chief of police under your influence, it was time for a new one." And he was obviously looking for Henry still. Henry was clandestinely leaving the country again the next day. Stan made a plan. The way Henry was going, everything would unravel. He had become unstable in Stan's eyes. Henry was staying in a cottage on the far end of the farm. It was a sumptuous cottage with its own indoor heated lap pool and spa. It was completely private. The cottage was rented out for exorbitant sums of money from time to time for dignitaries who wanted complete privacy. Stan went to see Henry that evening. He took a large bottle of the finest whisky. Henry was very fond of his whisky. Stan had made sure the spa was at its hottest. When he got there, Henry was well into a bottle already. Stan plied him with drink while moderating his own intake. Henry was off on a rant about everything, and Stan led him on until Henry had consumed the whole bottle. Stan suggested a spa. Henry's eyes were glazed over and he undressed to his undies and plunged in. He slipped on the way in and cracked his head. He didn't come up again, and Stan didn't help him. Stan removed his glass and went back to the mansion. But unknown to Stan, Henry had been playing possum, and he hadn't drunk quite as much as Stan thought that he had. He kind of had some suspicions about his son Stan, and he knew what he would have done in the same situation. And the other thing that he'd seen Stan do, or came aware, he'd turned the thermostat right up on the spa pool. That's when Henry came up with a plan. If the plan was for him to be dead, then dead he should be. What Stan didn't know was, down by the cottage, not that far away, on the other side of the road, there were some old houses that Henry owned, run down, tumbled and all the rest. And in one of them there was an old tramp who lived there, who occasionally did a job for Stan. He was a drunk. One of sort of Henry's secret army of unsavoury helpers. He was about the same height and ages as Henry as well. So Henry went in, when he got out of the pool first, with his head bleeding, and he went over the road and he got the old fella there and he got him back. And when he got there, he cracked him on the head and swapped the clothes with him and put him into the pool, which was now hot, really hot, and left. He took the 10 kilos of gold and just left. The next morning, Stan came into the house, and there it was. He discovered Henry dead in the spa. He was surprised to see the spa pork turned right up. It was cooking temperature, and the body that was in there had been cooking all night. The flesh was just falling off it. It was terrible. Eric came up and checked it out, and he was confused about what it was. He wanted that body taken out. He was sure that Stan was involved, but he couldn't prove anything. Stan had the lawyers there straight away. You'd think that they should have had the body go into the, a bit of forensics, but it just didn't happen. There was a big funeral with speeches and dignitaries. The media reported on the loss of a titan in business. Of course, there was the question of an arrest warrant that had been out for him, but nothing was proven, and you shouldn't speak ill of the dead. There was much made of Stan taking over the reins of power. There was a new evil in town, and it was worse than the previous. Hunter had a party for his birthday, and Molly's. It turned out that the birthdays were only about a week apart, but Molly's had been given to her by the nuns. They weren't sure when the exact birthday was, and they both went out for dinner at the local restaurant. Her cake shop was going great. Hunter had cashed in the 2 kilos of gold, and he had all sorts of idea. Lockie was licensing production of his brolly. It was well proven. It had been well tested. Jack was busy going out on dates with Juliet and building racing motorcycles in his spare time, and Moxy was back from the farmer's place. Henry Maguire had slipped out of town, disguised as the tramp, and it was 10 kilos. He had plans as well, and it was going to suit him to be dead, or thought of as dead anyway. They were all well away from the Maguires and their carryings on, and that was the way they liked it. Hunter had gotten a log out of the bush and was cutting it up into carved walking sticks. When he'd received a phone call from BP, and BP said, "Hey, how about I pick you up in the morning first thing tomorrow? We're going to have a look at a dead cow." One of the local farmers, a guy I know, wants us to have a look at it. And Hunter wondered why anyone would want you to come out and have a look at a dead cow. Early the next morning, BP picked Hunter up, and they went out and they had a look, and it was quite a horrific thing to see. Half the cow was gone, bitten clean in half, like a giant alligator or something, but there were no alligators or lions or tigers or bears. Just a cow in his paddock, bitten clean in half with the teeth marks. And although they couldn't hear them on the other side of the bay, because this farm was a coastal one onto the bay, and right over the far side of the bay at Cyro Labs, an alarm bell was ringing. Not that Hunter or BP could hear it from where they were, but that is another story.